like it if we have fun.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our webinar. We're just going to wait a few minutes to allow all the attendees to trickle in. In the meantime, be sure to introduce yourself. Let us know where you're joining us and maybe what you're excited to learn about today. You can find the chat there at the bottom of Zoom, and you should be able to chat to everyone. Just make sure that blue thing, the blue should say hosts and panelists, just switch that to everyone, and then everyone can see your chat.
All right. So we can't see anybody. Just I can see you two. Just that's it. None of the guests.
No, none of
All
the
right, all right. Well,
they can see you, Ellen.
we're just gonna make it up that you're looking like Glenn, like you just came in from the field. Julia! All
Awesome.
right,
I'm smiling
nice.
at you. Awesome, Julia. Thanks for joining us.
Well, that's gonna make me nervous. She's my mentor. Uh-oh. I'm having like a secret oral review here. Surprise, not secret.
You know.
We're
For those
good.
just joining, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, let us know where you're joining us, and yeah, what you're excited to learn today. We'd love to see it.
Yeah, we'll do a couple of questions. Yeah, so I was going to do a raising of the hands, but that's not going to mean anything to me. Cedar Grove, all right.
Awesome. From Utah, North Carolina. Perfect. Texas.
Connecticut, yay.
Wow, from everywhere here. This is awesome to see. New Jersey, Louisiana, New York.
All right, so local line, you have people all over the country and Canada.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and you're not mostly Canadians, you're both. You're
We're
equal
both, yeah,
opportunity.
equal
Okay.
opportunity. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we have customers kind of all throughout the States, Canada, even have some in Australia, a bit of everything. So
Oh,
welcome.
wow.
Thanks for
Park
coming.
Ridge Organics. There's some of my buddies from Wisconsin. Howdy do. All right, there's some.
Ontario.
All right.
Amazing. Well, without further ado, I'm going to kick off the introduction here. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us for today's workshop. Our team at Localine is very excited to give this. So we are talking all about pricing here today. We have two very special guests. We have Ellen Polishuk from Plant to Profit. She's a farm consultant with decades of experience, and she's going to tell us all about crop costing here, which is super exciting. And we also have Glenn, Farmer Glenn from Cold Springs Organics, located in Campbellcroft, Ontario. Glenn runs a 1.5 acre market garden, and we're super excited because he actually has one of his crops here that Ellen and Glenn are going to price live. So super excited. A few housekeeping things. This presentation is recorded. We're going to take the recording, process it, and send it out to everyone as early as tomorrow morning. So be sure to stay tuned in your inbox for the recording. Throughout the presentation, if you have any questions for Glenn and for Ellen, you can either pop those in the kind of the chat that we've already used. There's also that Q&A box if you prefer to use that. And you can always raise a hand as well. We'll try to hold questions off to a minimum throughout the presentation unless it's super relevant in that moment. Otherwise, we'll have a live Q&A at the end to ask any further questions, follow-up questions, all of that good stuff. So without further ado, I will pass the floor over to Ellen to introduce herself and get started here.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Ellen Polishuk. I'm going to take my face off the screen. That helps a lot. I'm talking to you from Maryland, just outside Washington, D.C., where, as you know, it's a complete and utter shitstorm. Okay, so that's where I live. And let's just say I love Canada. Okay, so whatever's going on over there has nothing to do with me. I love Canada. Okay, so we're going to talk about pricing today. I'm going to go ahead and jump right into my slides just because that keeps me organized and on point. So I'm going to go start with that. Screen 2. You're looking at my schedule. And here's my slides. Okay, do you see slides?
Not yet,
No.
no.
That's not good. Okay, wonder why. We practiced and it still didn't work. How about now?
No, nothing on my end.
Okay, so that's not good either. Well, sorry, I'm
Did you
gonna
click on share, Ellen?
yeah,
Share and
here we
then,
go. Let's try it again. Screen two, share. How about
yep,
now? What do you
there.
see?
I see your calendar.
Yeah,
Yes,
how
your
about now?
slides. Slides.
Okay, there we go.
Good to
Right
go.
on, everybody. You got my face nice and warm for this meeting. Okay, so I changed the title of our talk because this is going to be more fun and I like to be punchy. How can you make a profit when you don't know what it costs you to grow the thing? Okay, so that's what we're up to today is we're growing the thing and we're going to figure out what is it actually costing us to grow it. So we promised, or let's say Nina promised, in her promo that we were going to talk about the biggest pricing mistake that farmers make. And the answer is they're basing their prices solely imaginary, on magic. They're just picking numbers based on what they see in the marketplace or what they used to do. And it has no relationship to what it's costing them to grow the thing. That's the big takeaway. And we're going to show you today how it's not that hard for you to actually start figuring out what it costs you to grow the thing. I was going to do a little thing about who's in the room. We've gotten great responses from where you're calling in from, where you're farming. So we've got the location piece. If you were to throw in the chat what size operation you have and kind of what's your main enterprise, I'm going to let Nina monitor that and then just like tell me the magic answer of like what has she seen from all of these chats because I'm not good at keeping track of the chat.
No
So I'm
worries.
going to let you guys throw in and I'll start with this. So I think it's important for you to know where I'm coming from. If I'm going to be sitting in the front of the room here speaking with authority, you need to know why. And so this is who I am as I sit here in front of you. I am a stand for you finding out what it costs you to grow your crops so that you can charge a fair price and meet your financial goals. Okay? So that's who I'm being as I'm sitting here with you. And then this is just a little tiny bit about who I am so you know like just the smallest bit of why I think I could sit here and talk to you like this. Okay. So, top left, right? So, we're reading in English. So, we're going to start at the top left and move to the right. So, my name is Ellen Polishuk. I spent 25 years farming in the Washington, D.C. Area. I lived in Virginia at the time. My farm that I had partners with and farmed with is called Potomac Vegetable Farms. It existed before I entered the business and it existed after I left the business. And it's actually the first place I ever worked as a teenager. So I grew up down the street and ended up becoming a partner in the farm as a grown up, which is pretty cool story. Anyway, we grew lots of vegetables, herbs, a little bit of cut flowers, selling them all retail into the Washington, D.C. market and uh, using what we called at the time eco-organic methods, so non-certified organic. And between two locations, we had about $1 million business. Okay. So, and all retail. I never was a wholesale grower. So after I quit farming in 2017, 2018, now we're into the present tense. I turned into a farm coach and advisor, and my job is to lead workshops like this. I lead lots of small grower circles, I call them, like a learning circle, and I run mastermind events. I do a little bit of bookkeeping and lots of business analysis, helping farmers with their numbers, whether it's through getting their accounting organized or helping them gather the right data from the field so they can do crop costing. Woo! All right. I'm going to just roll us towards the actual tool If you guys are not on a computer and you're trying to watch this on a phone, you're pretty soon going to get super cranky with me because we're going to actually look at the spreadsheet tool, and it's just not going to present really well on a tiny format. You're not going to be able to see very well. So if you had a chance to get to a bigger screen in the next 5 minutes, that would be super smart. Okay, so I'm going fast, I'm talking fast, I'm from the East, so that's normal. I'm excited, and I don't want to hog up all the time. I want to get to the juicy part, which is Glenn and I working on the sheet together. So the rules for the road today, I love questions, and if they are super germane to what we're doing in that moment, you're going to either do the little raised hand symbol, or you're going to send something to Nina and say, "Wow, this is important. Something's wrong," or "I have something important to ask." Otherwise, we're going to have it more concentrated at the end after we've done the majority of the presentation. Okay, so I can't see your faces, so I'm just going to assume you're all plugged in, and here we go. So here's the subtitle, or the where we go next. What if you stopped growing stupid crops? This is a really good question. And of course, I'm being a little sassy. I'm being a little forward with you because that's kind of my thing. That's how I work. And so we should think about what is stupid. And in this view shed of where we are now in this webinar, stupid crops are crops you're losing money on. So what would happen if you stopped growing stupid crops, or you started charging more than what it costs you to grow them? So that's what we're going to explore today. I think this could change your farm business significantly. That's what I think. That's what would happen. Okay, so we're going to look at a crop costing tool. And I can't believe you all signed up to talk about this, because nobody wants to talk about it, even though it's of tremendous importance. So here's the crop costing tool we're going to use. It's a little bit of what I would call an upside down tool, compared to maybe you've looked at some templates out of universities, where they call it a budget, a crop budget. So I find that this tool is more approachable and gets you to a better and more realistic result. So that's why it's the one that I teach. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what price is available for the product in the marketplace. We're going to talk about what is our gross margin goal on your farm. We're going to get into the weeds, literally and figuratively, on what does it cost you to grow the crop. And at the bottom of the tool, it's going to say, hey, is that price going to meet your goal or not? And it's going to tell you, this is what you have to charge in order to break even. Okay, so that's the setup. I want to look at these individually. Hey, Nina, what did you learn about who our audience is?
Yeah, a bit of a mix. We have a handful of people that are around the like 1 to 3 acres, like a variety of organic vegetables, someone producing bison, um,
Whoa,
mixed veggies, fruits, and chickens, certified organic blueberries and other berries, expanding into organic vegetables and cut flowers, microgreens. So quite a variety.
nice. Okay. Um, cool. So the first thing I just want to highlight is, how do you figure out what price you want to put into the tool to start with? And obviously you can use the one that you've been already charging. You can ask, somebody else what their price is, or you could look it up on varying and assorted public services. Ask a wholesale buyer, what kind of prices are they throwing out into the marketplace? So that's pretty easy. The main sticking place of this tool is that it's using this jargon, this idea called your gross margin goal. And so I'm just going to spend a couple, 3 minutes on the gross margin goal. And then we're really going to get into the tool itself, which is an Excel spreadsheet tool. Okay. So let's talk about gross profit and gross margin. So again, starting on the left, we're going to talk about gross profit, which is a dollar figure. So we're going to pretend that we have $100,000 in sales. We're going to subtract out direct inputs, and we're going to subtract out direct labor. So direct labor is everything that's involved in the production of the crop itself, not overhead labor, not marketing labor, not selling labor, direct labor to produce, okay? So we subtract those direct inputs out and we're left with $37,000 of gross profit. So this is written in numbers. This is the exact same thing, just written in prose, in case that works better in your brain. Sales minus direct costs and direct labor equals gross profit. Okay, so that's gross profit as a dollar figure. Here it is again on the left. So then we take this $37,000 in gross profit and we find out how much of a percent of the gross sales is it. It's 37%. So 37% is our gross margin percentage. So this is now the money that we have to basically pay for every single other thing on the farm. For instance, non-specific operating expenses like fuel, some other kinds of supplies, repairs, and tools, all your back office stuff that keeps you in business, fees, dues, utilities, capital improvements, etc., all your fixed expenses, your debt, your rent, your insurance, your taxes, indirect or overhead labor, if you have office staff or sales staff, and then your compensation for whatever it is that you do that's not production labor. So maybe some of you on a small operation, you're half the labor force that's actually doing the production labor of planting, tending, and harvesting. So this is for all the other work that you do that's not production labor. And this is where your profit's going to come from. So basically, it's everything that's not in the costing tool. Everything that we haven't accounted for in the costing tool is what gross margin has to cover. Okay, what's a reasonable gross margin goal? I would most want you to know what your gross margin is on your actual farm from your actual numbers. And Glenn and I worked on his. A benchmark would be something like 40 to 60% if you're primarily a retail kind of seller, and maybe 20%, as low as 20% if you're a big farm and you're selling wholesale, meaning you don't have all the extra cost of dealing with a bunch of retail markets and spending a lot of time selling at a farmer's market or dealing with your CSA customers. Okay, what are some actual gross margin goals of people that I've worked with, customers that I've worked with? Here's a mixed vegetable and flower farm in Georgia selling into Atlanta. They're coming in at 45%. Mixed vegetable farm in the DC area where the owner doesn't need a lot of pay for himself, and he's at a gross margin of 37%. Another farm that I know in this DC area, this is a full family operation. Both partners, husband and wife, are involved up to their eyeballs, and they're at a gross margin of about 60%. So that's the range of farms that I personally work with or know of in my universe. Okay, let's get into the tool. So I want to stop sharing all together and I want, all right, or did we stop share?
You stopped
Yes.
sharing, yeah.
Okay, I just want Glenn to introduce himself and just get us kind of oriented. And then once we've had a chance to see your face and your smile, then I'll share the tool. Okay.
Thanks, Ellen. My name's Glenn. I'm the guinea pig today. So I have been farming for 5 years. We have a CSA farm. We do one farmer's market. So we grow over 50 different crops, which gives an interesting perspective on the crop costing tool. And we're just northeast of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I'll stop there and we can get started with the tool, Ellen.
All right, cool. Welcome, Glenn. Thank you for being a brave and happy guinea pig. Okay. Sharing the screen again. And here's the tool. How's that working? Does that look good?
Looks good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so I made it nice and big so that for people like me, because I can't see very well. So this is I want you to just see this stuff on the right here. I have to give credit where credit is due. So I met this tool from Kitchen Table Consultants when I was working with them for a little while back a few years ago. So they created this tool in its base form. Kitchen Table Consultants has now renamed and rebranded, and they're called Good Roots, and they do business consulting and have a full, huge bookkeeping department for farms and food businesses in the United States. So thank you, KTC. They gave me permission long ago to take this tool and run because I love it so much. And so I added a lot of language because I'm a big talker and to try to make the tool as easy to follow as possible. And then I added the break even numbers on the bottom because I'm not scared to put break even on the bottom. Okay, so the rules.
Before you
Go
jump
ahead.
in, sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. I'm sure this is a question. Actually, I already see a question from Amanda. Are people able to access this tool afterwards?
Yes, thank you. I should have thought of that. Yeah, so tomorrow Nina is going to send you a follow-up email saying thank you for coming, love, love, love. And she's going to give you a link that'll take you to my website where you can go and get the tool for free. Okay. It's literally this exact spreadsheet that we're going to look at today that has several tabs on the bottom with a bunch of different examples to show you these are real examples of real farms in the real world running their numbers. Okay, so this is what I sent to Glenn with no introduction whatsoever. Like I didn't say, hey, let me help you do the tool. I was like, you're smart, you're young, here's the tool, go for it. So he did. So we're going to kind of do like a call and response. And so that both of us are going to be speaking about this tool at the same time. Okay. Are we good, Nina? Everything's cool?
Yes. Yeah, everything's
Cool.
good.
Okay. So Glenn, tell us about what crop that are we going to look at today? Just get us a little bit oriented on this crop.
I just went with lettuce mix because it's a big seller. And, from all my neighboring farmers, it's one that people rely on for a lot of their revenue and profit. So that's why I wanted to start with that.
And did you have a pretty good feeling? I think I suggested it's fun to start with a crop that you think you are doing well with. And I think you said,
Yeah,
yeah,
I thought that it would be a good one because we have made some investments. So in terms of tooling, like we use the greens harvester, for example, and we have a salad spinner. So that makes us a lot more efficient in terms of washing, harvesting, packing. So I
nice.
thought, it'd be interesting to, kind of sharpen the pencil on it.
Nice. Okay. So just to get you oriented on the tool, and I'm sorry, it's an Excel spreadsheet. It's just not good looking. Okay. And nobody spent a lot of time trying to make this like happy and beautiful, but it's super useful. Okay. So just hang with us. So the peach colored cells are the ones that are not locked. So those are the ones that are available only for you to put your numbers in. All the gray colored cells, as you can see, are this color gray, are locked, and that's where the formulas are. If you want to unlock it, you can totally do it. There's no password, and you can just mess it all up as best as you like. Okay. So for right now, we're on step 1, which is let's talk about what the crop is. All right. So tell us, Glenn, just these first few lines here in the crop, etc.
Yeah, so I mean, basically you just fill it in with the crop name and then your unit of measure. So if that's going to be a bunch of carrots or it's going to be a kilogram of lettuce mix. And then we use JM Fortier style market gardening. So we have the 100-foot standard beds. And then we use 8 rows per bed. I think the 100-foot is interesting in terms of the calculations. I don't think the 8 rows per bed is factored in.
No, it's not.
So yeah.
But it does, it's just, it helps explain a little more about what it would look like if we were looking at a bed of your lettuce, as opposed to when I grew lettuce, I transplanted it and it was 3 rows to a bed. So completely different kind of lettuce growing than I used. Okay, so step 2, let's talk about yield per bed. So here we are. Go ahead and talk to us about these lines, 19, 20, 21. And then we'll do,
So
yeah.
I mean, this is interesting. Probably some of the people on the call right now have done JM Fortier's masterclass. So you might have started like me with using his Google sheet that he has, and they predict for every crop what kind of a yield you'll get. But those are experts in highly optimized circumstances. And so it's taken me a few years, year over year, to get a reasonable estimate for what our yield is per bed. And so I've got 48 kilograms. And the price per unit looks like a really weird number, but it's because, you know, we sell it in bags, not by the kilogram. So when you factor it in across, you know, basically our bag of lettuce, it becomes 26.67 per kilogram, which works with the rest of the spreadsheet to keep it in per kilogram pricing.
Yeah. Okay, so it's important to keep remembering that we're talking about one single bed. So all of Glenn's yield and how that yield is then turned into the sellable product is all on one bed. So the tool will do the first calculation here, which is 48 kilograms at this price. So the total gross income for that bed is $12.80. Okay. So then we come to the gross margin goal. And I've changed this tool, this red box, since I gave the tool to Glenn. So when he got it 2 or 3 weeks ago, it said just start with 40% if you're a retail grower. So he put 40%. Yeah. Okay.
That's
We're
right.
gonna, yeah, we're gonna talk about this we're gonna mess around with this number after we run through it the first time. Okay. So so Glenn ran through this with the gross margin goal of 40%. All right. So that's step 2 finished. So I'm gonna scroll up. All right, step 3 is just enter if you wanted to have the whole picture of all the successions of growing this crop, or how many beds even in one succession. You just in this one cell would enter how many beds of this crop are you going to grow. And for you,
Yeah, so for example, for this year, we have 4.5 beds that are planned. So that's what I put in there.
yep,
I don't know if you were going to touch on it, Ellen, but I think an important thing for people to keep in mind is, say, for example, if we're doing radishes and you put a 100-foot bed, so you said it's whatever, 600 bunches of radishes. Are you going to turn 600 bunches of radishes into 600 times $4 per bunch and actually get that money back? So that's something to keep in mind is how much are you growing, but how much can you sell? Because
yep.
I'm definitely constrained by how much I can sell more so than how much I can grow.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point, and you could play. That's the fun of having a tool, is you could run it with, I'm going to sell everything I can pick, like the most positive, highly optimized situation, or you could say, yeah, but in real life, I don't sell everything. And so I'm just going to say, yeah, I have 48 kilograms per bed, but I'm only going to sell 40. So that's the fun of the tool. You can run different scenarios, even of the same crop. Awesome. All right, step 4, enter, this is now what's your labor situation? Okay, so here's step 4. What's your labor situation?
So yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
basically, I just took an average wage. We pay a living wage, and then we have the taxes and fringe benefits. So all of your things like WSIB, which is workers' compensation, and things like that add up. So that puts a 15% markup essentially, and you end up with an effective labor rate of $23 per hour.
right on. There you go. You said all the right words. That's someone who knows exactly how labor paying for labor works. Okay, so we have this calculated now at $23 an hour. Okay, step 5. Now we're getting,
Question,
yep,
Ellen, from
yeah.
the audience, that I think is relevant. A question from Krista. If you sell the same crop retail and wholesale, would you do this, like, would you do 2 separate sheets, or would you modify the gross margin goal to reflect these separate revenue streams?
Yeah. Well, the second question is, I would find out what your actual gross margin is and use that number. Then it doesn't matter which way you're going to sell. And in terms of, you're going to get your cost to grow at the bottom, regardless of what price is available in the marketplace. You're going to, when we get to the bottom, it's going to say, this is what you need to make in order to hit to pay for everything on your farm. And so that will give you the number you can play with. Likely, if you're selling it wholesale, you're going to have some different cost structure, right? You may have, and you'll see it's coming right now. You may have wax boxes that you're going to sell it, use to contain them, and you're going to be spending more on boxes than if you were selling retail. So likely, you're going to need to run 2 sheets. Long answer, very good question.
Awesome. And then just, sorry, one more question on labor, just because we just covered that.
Yeah.
And it's asking, do you include your own labor, and how would you measure that cost?
Yeah. So this is what we call direct labor. So if you are the person that is doing the harvesting and the growing of the crop, then I think you could figure out what you get to decide. Are you going to put in what you actually earn by the hour, which may be a fairly low number, maybe not, or are you going to put in the number that is actually what you wish you were making as a farmer when you are being a production laborer? So you could run it either way. Does that make sense? Or you could say, yeah, I'm one of the people on the team that's going to harvest, wash, and pack, and take average your wage in with the rest of your teammates and come up with kind of an average wage. Man, you guys are good. These are really high-powered questions. Okay, so step 5 is getting into the nitty-gritty of what kinds of direct inputs are in the growing of this crop. So salad mix doesn't have a super long list of ingredients, so to speak. Whereas if we were working with, trellised high tunnel tomatoes, we would have mulch, we would have all kinds of drip tape, we'd have, how are you going to trellis it? We'd have more direct costs in the production than we do here. So tell us, Glenn, what these direct costs are for you.
I mean, like you said, they're pretty basic. So I've got the seeds there, including shipping costs. I've got the soil amendments, so our organic chicken manure, so on and so forth. I kind of have to dummy that down because I use, Logan Labs, and I get pretty specific in terms of what amendments we put per bed. But I basically have 2 categories. I have new ground that I'm converting from pasture to garden beds, and we have a formula for that. And then I have previously amended beds. So I kind of just made it 2 buckets versus getting really precise in terms of how much, of sulfur that I put into that bed and things like that.
And are you having to irrigate these beds at all?
Yes.
And how do you irrigate?
Well, we have drip or overhead irrigation.
Yeah. So it's possible that we could add a line in here that would be drip tape.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's one that we didn't think of so far. You know, Glenn did the tool. I worked with him once or twice on it, and I didn't throw it in until right now, just to be a pain in the neck. So there could be a few more things listed, and this is the point at which I want to say to you, the more times you go over the tool with somebody else or by yourself, the more you think, oh yeah, I forgot about this thing. Oh yeah, and then we do this other thing. So repetition is really helpful here. So I'm just going to leave that drip tape right there blank. We don't have to mess with the numbers right now, but there it is. And of course, if you decide you want to do these crop costing on for different crops on your farm, you're going to end up with like a sheet of like normal metrics. Like this is fertility per bed. This is how much time it takes me to prepare a bed. Doesn't matter what the crop is, you know that it takes 30 minutes or whatever it is. Okay, so section 5, we've got seeds, soil amendment, and bags, selling supply.
Yeah, so however you're packaging it, yeah, I guess if it's elastic bands, I probably wouldn't be that interested, but the bags do add up a little bit, so I
Yep.
have those in there. I wanted to make a quick comment about that step 4 labor one. I definitely wouldn't put a lower number than I want as a living wage in that. I see the comments here, and
Okay.
you know, I think that our habit as farmers is we want to give away stuff rather than selling it. And I think that, if we're going to be professionals, we got to make sure that we're covering our costs. It's not going to be economically sustainable if we don't include a living wage in that labor. And it might not be you doing it, it might be somebody else doing it. So I think that's really important.
Okay, so I'm just putting a little coaching there. So put in what you actually pay others. That's a real hard number that you have. And then what is it that you really need to be making to have this be a sustainable business for yourself? Okay, so step 5 was the input step. And this is going to add it all up to $65 in direct inputs for the one bed of salad mix on Glenn's farm. Cool.
Quick question.
So
Sorry,
yeah,
related to drip.
no, that's good.
Drip tape. It can be used over and over again. Do you amortize that original cost over a number of years?
I was thinking the same thing when you put it in there. I was like, we try to reuse it.
Yeah.
But I guess the safe approach would be to just assume that it gets damaged enough that you have to put new stuff. And then, no matter what happens, you're covered.
Yep. I would, you're going to do whatever you want to do. You're going to do the closest thing to reality that you can come up with. So I decided early in the game, I was on, growing 10 acres of crops. I didn't keep any T-tape. I threw it all away every year. So that was easy for me. For you, do whatever you think is accurate. So maybe you're going to use it twice. So take the cost and divide it by 2. Because sometimes you're going to wreck it up and throw it away. Sometimes you might use it 3 times. I have learned as even a silly gardener that I am now, reusing it doesn't work great. They just don't, the emitters get plugged. So I'm not a big fan of reusing. Cool? Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So here's a section again in gray where the tool itself is going to say, all right, well, I have some really good information. You've told me about yield. You've told me about what your costs are. And I'm going to use that information and I'm going to tell you that you have a budget of $703 or 30 hours to spend on this bed in order for you to reach your gross margin goal of 40%. How does that sound to you, Len? Do you think you need more than 30 hours to grow and harvest and pack that bed of lettuce?
No.
Good. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. All right, so then we go to the next. We're getting increasingly more pain in the ass. Okay, so up to now, you're like, wow, this is not so bad. I don't hate this at all. Okay, this is the part where you're going to hate it. Step 6, right? So most of us in the vegetable world know that what we're really spending money on our farms is labor. So let's talk about in step 6, all the labor inputs to growing this crop. All right, so I'm just going to set the stage and then Glenn's going to fill it all in. So here is a list of all the different activities, some of which you may use, some of which you won't. In column C, you're going to put how many times are you going to do this activity? And in column D, you're going to say how many minutes is it take me each time I do it? So for instance, if you were weeding, you may need to weed twice. In this case, this is a fast crop and Glenn is only going to do each activity once. Okay, talk us through it, Glenn.
Yeah, so before this season, I would have been taking a total shot in the dark from memory. But this season, we tried to keep track of how many minutes it took us for each activity, for each different crop. So I still was guessing at a lot of these things because it's hard for a CSA farm to keep really detailed
Absolutely.
records to the minute for each individual crop. But you know, bed preparation is irrigate, tarp, then remove the tarp, amend the bed, power harrow it, tarp the bed, remove the tarp, flame weed it. So that was 72 minutes.
So
And
you can see he's written it all out here.
yeah,
Here's the whole series of events. So I encourage you to do this, like Glenn, I said, put notes on here so that you can remember and compare over time. Okay.
and this is a really interesting example because I just went and flame weeded the carrots that I planted the other day. And I was thinking about how I said it took 12 minutes, but it ended up taking me 90 minutes because, you know, I had a problem with this and I had a problem with that. And so that's why my overhead is so high in the end, because, you know, what should take 12 minutes takes 90 minutes more often than not.
Yeah.
But so basically it goes through the whole list here, right? Seeding, we use the Jang seeder. It just takes a bit of time to go get the seeds and measure them out and then put them in the seeder and bring the seeder to the field and do that. And then I put in some time for hand weeding. Usually we tackle one block at a time. So we don't say, oh, I did 12 minutes of weeding the carrots today. We'll do like 10 beds at a time to try to be a bit more efficient. Irrigation, I just, you know, put kind of a little bit of a bucket on there because again, we're irrigating the whole entire field,
Right.
you know, acre and a half.
Right.
And then in terms of the harvesting, your model has an assumption is that you harvest everything from that bed at once. And because we're relatively new and smaller, we go out and we harvest, maybe we only harvest 15, 20 feet because we only need that amount for that farmer's market or, you know, so I just, for the sake of this exercise, I put in 60 minutes, which would actually be on the high side for us to do a whole bed because the greens harvester is very quick. But what takes us a long time is washing, spinning, you know, waiting for the salad spinner to do its job. And we only have one, so we can't do a bunch of runs in parallel. And then to individually bag all of that salad mix.
Yeah.
So that's where the bulk of the time is in actuality.
Nice. Yeah. If you were talking about a crop, just dealing with that idea of how many times are you going to harvest? So if you were talking about summer squash, I worked on this tool with a grower in Kentucky on summer squash. He's like, yeah, we're going to pick it 16 times. The whole, you know, that bed is going to get walked past 16 times. So you could put the number 16 here. And how long does it take you to harvest the bed on average? Okay. So that's one, a different kind of crop that's harvested over and over and over again. And then you did also put in the clearing and plowing under, cleaning up the patch, taking the T-tape out and putting the tarp on it, or whatever it is that's going to happen next. That's awesome, Glenn. And just, based on what we were just saying, it's like we should have a line here called farting around, things go wrong. Okay. Like, right. So it's one thing to start the clock when you're standing at the front of the bed and you're
Right.
going. And it's another
Yeah.
thing to start the clock when you're back in the barn saying, let's go harvest. So we could say farting around, well, like 15 times we're going to fart around for 2 minutes, you could, you know what I'm saying? You give yourself some fudge factor. So I'm just messing around to show you how easy it is for you to work. Whoopsie, now I screwed it all up.
Just
Work
while
on
you're
this
doing
tool.
that, Ellen, there's a really good question in the chat, which I think would
Yeah.
be relevant for anybody that's not growing crops in the ground. So they're asking, how would I consider this around producing edible flowers or things like that? And I think the simple answer is, instead, wherever you see bed here, you're just thinking of like a succession. So you've got a process that goes from end to end, which is whether you start with a calf or you start with a seed or you start with whatever, all the way to the point where you're handing it over to the customer.
Yep.
You got a process that goes one from the start to the finish, and every step along that process should be in this document so that all your time and your inputs are captured. And then you have a total of the time times the wage per hour plus the supplies that gives you the cost per unit. Whether that's a succession or a bed or a calf or a
Right.
bison or whatever.
Right. Or one flat of microgreens.
Right.
Right. And it's going to be very small amounts of minutes. You may have gathered the data that you usually seed 12 flats at once. And you know what I'm saying? So thank you. That's a great answer to a question. And I'm not, as you know, looking at anything in the chat. Okay. So we've run through, here's all the minutes. I'm leaving in the farting around. There we go. Because I messed up the tool. And so we have a total of a subtotal labor time in minutes of 440 minutes. And that is translated into 7 hours. Okay, so our budget, as you'll remember, was 30 hours. And Glenn's, even with farting around now, we have 7 hours used. Okay, so things are looking good.
You
Yeah.
only gave me 2 minutes to fart around. I just
But
saying.
15 times, but 15 times, that's a whole
Okay.
half an hour of farting around. That's pretty good. Okay, you can do anything you want. Okay, so now we get to the ta-da part. Okay, so step 7, this is all the tool doing the math for you. So again, everything in gray are where there's formulas. So here we have your 4.5 beds with a projected yield of 216 kilograms with a total gross income of 5760. Here's the direct costs for 4.5 beds. Here's the labor input for 4.5 beds. Here's your gross profit in dollars. So 5760 minus direct costs minus direct labor gives us 4,700 in gross profit dollars, which is 82% gross margin. Your goal was 40, so this is like amazing. This is so good. And then here's your cost to grow each unit, which is a kilogram, $4.87. And I'm leaving you all these like, wow, remember this notes. And this is your break-even price for this scenario. So this is the cost to grow, $4.87. Adding in everything else is going to be $8. Okay, so how did you feel about this, Glenn, when you got to the bottom?
Well, it implies that I'm making money hand over fist. but I knew that the 40% overhead was low for my case. And I think probably for most CSA farmers, because we have so many different crops. So I think it kind of told me that if I was going to spend time to get more efficient, I should probably look at my other crops, which would not be as, looking as good in this model.
Yeah. So let's just remind ourselves so this is the cost to grow. So this is not going to change unless we are fiddling around with, you change how much time you're spending, you think of a direct input. So this number is solid. But let's take your idea about, hey, maybe the gross margin is not really right. So for the folks in the room, I met with Glenn and I was like, send me your P&L and let me do a quick and dirty discovery of what your actual gross margin is. And I came up with 75% is what I came up with. So if I go back to the top and instead of saying 40, we say 75, okay, what's going to change down here? So now our labor budget became 11 hours. It used to be 30. So for us to reach our goal, we didn't change anything else in the tool. We still are operating under budget at 7 hours. The big ta-da, the cost to grow is still the same, but now the break-even price is $19, but you're still getting 26 or whatever. I think it was $26 you're getting. So this crop is still a really good crop for you. And the gross margin that we put in there is real. That's based on your actual numbers. And all I did is I quickly looked at Glenn's profit and loss report and I grabbed out anything that wasn't on this sheet. And he helped me pick a number for how much labor we would call direct labor. Anyway, this is what we're about. This is the tool. This is important. I think there's a bunch of questions. So let's
Yes.
and let's open up and hear if there's other great questions. I'm sure there are. I think I'll leave the screen here in case I need to move around and show
Sure.
you something.
Yeah, so question from Michael, does break-even price cover the 40% gross margin, which I saw that Glenn responded to in the chat, but maybe you guys
Great.
want to do this?
Yeah, so the cost, break-even break-even price covers all your direct and your indirect. So that's break even. And if you don't have profit built into your gross margin, then you want to do better than break even, right? You want to pay yourself and you want 10% more to put in, into the kitty for the future or to reinvest in the farm. Great question.
Awesome. Another question from Joanna, do we need a new spreadsheet for each produce product in case we have more than one crop?
Yes. So that's the fun of having tabs and just copying and pasting. You'll see, you can't see it very well, I don't imagine, but on the bottom of the tool, there's an example of cherry tomatoes in Texas, kale in Georgia at wholesale, carrots with a root washer. So at the very bottom of the tool is a whole nother section called, what if I bought a new piece of equipment to make me faster, save on labor? And this helps you think through that purchase. And there's also a tab in here that helps you think about what does it cost you to grow transplants. So there's a whole costing sheet on what does it cost you to grow your transplants, which is a big deal. All right, what do you got?
Amazing. Actually, I have a hand up from April. So April, I'll give you permission to speak now if you want to.
Yeah.
Okay, it should allow you to speak.
You just have to unmute.
Oh,
Does that work?
I still see you're muted, April. Is it working?
She hit it by accident.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Great.
So are there any other
Okay.
questions in the chat?
Yes, there are more.
Cool. What you got?
Okay, Kim asking is, should an overhead percentage be considered?
What does that mean? I don't know what that means. I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about is overhead. So overhead is going to be fit into gross margin. So gross margin is what do you need to cover all the rests of your costs. So it's sort of the most robust definition of overhead that you've ever considered. It's basically everything that is not this, not direct labor and not direct inputs, right? So that's why when Glenn and I were talking, it's like, well, how much of your labor is really direct versus overhead? You have to think about what are people doing on the farm. Okay, that's a good, short, long answer. Go ahead.
Awesome question here from Krista. I think you kind of addressed it, but she's asking, is there a part of this tool that applies to raising livestock, or maybe how would you approach this if you're not producing vegetables?
Yeah. I think you could try the way Glenn was sort of helping you talk through it. Livestock and crops that are in the ground for a really long time are sort of extra complicated in a way. And I would point you to going on the web and typing in livestock compass. So it's a more complicated spreadsheet tool that comes out of the University of Wisconsin, and it's for mixed species livestock farms to figure out what is it costing you to grow each one of the species on your farm. And it's a whole other ball of wax, and it's super good. That's where you should go.
Just some praise here in the chat that I wanted to share with you, Ellen. Julia says this tool is fabulous. Heather saying thanks for sharing your experience out to Glenn. It's a powerful tool. Thank you for presenting it and your expertise. And then love it from Simone. What a handy tool. I wish I could have had access to this in November. So
yeah,
people are
well, you have access to it now. Is there anything else, Glenn, that you want to share with the folks?
I guess I saw one person ask if you can convert into Google Sheets, and yeah, you can just open it in your Google Drive, and it'll automatically convert. There's nothing really complicated
Yeah.
that Google will choke on from Excel here. The other thing I would say is, like, over time as a CSA farmer, my plan, I've only done 10 of them so far, but my plan is to basically do all of my crops in here so that I get an idea of, which ones I am, most and least quote unquote profitable on. Then I can decide if there are investments that I want to make. Or the other thing that's interesting, and it's hard as farmers to consider this, but because I like to do all my own stuff, and probably most people on the call do too, is, if my cost of goods sold, so that's the cost to grow per unit, is so high that I could get potatoes from my neighbor for less money, then maybe I need to think about doing that. So that piece without the overhead on it is an interesting number. And, the cost of goods sold is the term that's used to describe it. So that's something else to consider. And I also think if you're planning on something like, I want to do mushrooms or, different things like that, before you spend $1, basically use a tool like this to make your detailed cost model and figure out whether or not you're going to be able to make that money back. And don't be overly optimistic in terms of what you can sell and how long it's going to take you to get to that point.
Yeah. So yeah, I want to encourage the idea that you can run this in several iterations, best case scenario, worst case scenario. And that I also really want you to know how much better the tool is going to be if you show it to somebody else. So then that other person doesn't even have to be like a super farm nerd or like an expensive consultant or anything. It's just another grower or somebody else who can just say, well, that doesn't make any sense. And what about this? And what about that? Hopefully it would be another grower. So the tricky part, as you well know, guys, is to have any data at all to throw in there. So that's why we're here. I'm here, Glenn and I are here, and Nina, to inspire you, to get you excited about actually capturing labor data on maybe one crop, maybe two crops. Like start super small and set a goal for yourself that's actually doable. Don't try to figure everything out in one go, right? Just pick maybe one or two of your most important crops and maybe pick one crop that you're a little bit angry with. You're kind of like, I don't want to grow it anymore, and see if it earns its right to stay on your list, or whether you can say, done with that one, no more potatoes at my house, or whatever it is. Okay. So we're at 4 o'clock. That's an hour of spending beautiful time together. Anything else, Nina?
Yeah, just a few last questions.
Great.
So I think on the data piece, that was a great point. There was a point earlier from Heather. It'd be great to have a list of data that could be collected ahead of time to use the tool. So also encourage collaboration. If there's anything we can do at LocalLine to help kind of farms collaborate and help share data or anything, let us know. And then a follow-up question from Heather. Glenn, what is the data that you found the most challenging to collect or estimate for the tool?
I think if you look at labor versus the direct costs and supplies and what have you, I think labor for me was like 70–75%. So it makes more sense to try to get better handle on the labor than to try and get super granular about how many kilograms of chicken manure go per bed.
Yep.
And so I don't think you have to track every single minute you do in the field, but I do think that it's worth doing time trials and saying, okay, today we're going to see how long it takes us to harvest carrots, and get that on your whiteboard in your wash and pack station. And then
Yep.
you'll have that, take a picture of it. That's what I was using going into the spreadsheet that Ellen gave us. And then the other thing I would say is it's difficult to get to a point where you can say how many kilograms of lettuce mix that you sold from that bed per year. So I'd say that's an area that I need to improve. I need to say how many kilograms of lettuce mix am I taking to farmers market this day, and how many kilograms did I donate to the food share at the end of the day versus sell, so that I know, week by week I sold this much. And here's the total harvest from that particular bed.
Yep.
Again, I don't think you have to do it for every single bed. We have 140 beds or something, but I do think that it's worth having a few windows that you sort of trial, especially for your big crops. So those are both non-trivial to get, but I do think that we have to have a pretty good handle on those numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, I work with growers all around to try to figure out a system that will actually work on their farm to capture some numbers. So I was just talking to somebody yesterday, and I was like, just pick one crop and put a mailbox in the field with a piece of paper in it. And anytime anybody visits that patch, whether it's a bed or 3 beds, they have to open the mailbox and write down what they did and how many minutes they were there. Just one iteration. Another way to think about it is every day have your team, you or your team members, bring home one piece of data about something they did that day. And then you're going to come up with this crazy set of metrics about, how long did it take to plant a 100-foot bed of garlic? How long did, just one snapshot. And if you get enough snapshots, you're really going to have a really pretty good guess. So your guess is where you start with this, and then you back up your guess with better and better real data. Now you get excited about it, and you're like, it's a game. We're playing a game, and it's an important one. And I just am so excited if you will get excited about it.
Awesome. Just one last clarifying question, and then we'll wrap up here.
Yeah.
Janet was a bit confused about the 1949 break-even price. In that scenario, that's for kilogram.
Yeah.
Price. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So that's the break-even price, and then his actual, what he gets in the marketplace was $26.67. So it's still a profitable crop. We didn't talk about this part, but I'm just going to throw it in at the end. What I said to Glenn is like, wow, you're so good at growing and selling this, at growing this crop. You could take a lower price, still hit your goals, and sell. Could you sell wholesale? So that is that's a whole other conversation that can come out of learning actually how efficient you are at growing a crop. And that can open up a whole other avenue of sales that you always thought, oh, I can't sell wholesale because I'm too expensive. Well, maybe you're not. So
Mhm.
lots of possibilities.
100%. Well, thank you so much for starting the conversation, and thank you for the great questions from everyone. I think we're all pretty pumped to get our hands on the tool and get going. Glenn, quickly, if people want to find you or ask you questions or what are you up to, where can they find you?
So they can go to coldsprings.organics.com. That's our website. I actually have a blog post there supporting other small scale farmers where I posted my initial business plan. And I try to keep in mind that I'd like to upload more stuff there just to help. I'd like to see a lot more small farmers. So I'll try and put links there over time. So you could get on my newsletter or else just go to that website and download that.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll share that in the email as well so everyone can access to that. But thank you so much, Glenn. It was great to see your actual numbers and thanks for your input. It's been awesome. Ellen, if people want to work with you or learn more, where can they
Yeah.
go?
Yeah. So I have a website called Plant to Profit, not numbers, but letters. You're going to get an email tomorrow morning from Nina that'll have my name and my website on there. And that's a special link just for you guys who are at this webinar to click, and you just tell me your name and your address and it'll automatically jump right into your downloads. And so I would love to hear from you. You don't have to hire me, but I would just love to hear what you learn. Anything that you learn as you work with the tool, or if you get super stuck and you need help, just send me an email. I'm very easily available. All right.
Thank you so much, Ellen.
Yeah.
And just quickly from the local line side before we wrap up, if you enjoyed this webinar or you have feedback for us or there's other topics that you want us to cover, be sure to reply to our email tomorrow, let us know. And then our next workshop will be at the end of the month. It's on April 23rd, I believe. We're launching a new feature called Discover, which will allow you to find other producers, buyers, food hubs in your area, which we're really excited about. So that workshop will all be about this feature. If you have questions about how it works, all of that good stuff, be sure to check it out. Once again, thank you so much to Ellen and Glenn for your time today. This was awesome. I can't wait
You're
to get
welcome.
starting out. And we'll see hopefully everyone at the next one. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Ciao.